Welcome to another edition of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. We've got, it's Tuesday, right? And there's a lot of things that are happening, especially at the federal level these days. And so what I'd love to do after we go around the room and do the introductions is to ask Joyce Fleming if we can have any updates from our federal partners. Oh my gosh, and Stacy.
Hello.
All right, so we have Mayor Scott Hill from the city of McMinnville, Casey Kula, Yamhill County Commissioner. We've got Mayor Beth Wojtowski from Dayton. We have Shannon Buckmaster from the Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce. We have Joyce Fleming from Congresswoman Bonamici's office. We have Mayor Michael Cate from Amity. We've got Stacy Jacobson from U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley's office. We have Diane McLaren from Chemeketa Community College. And we have Commissioner Mary Starrett on as well. She's the little phone icon. So welcome, everybody. And I'd love to hear what is new at Congress. And also, we've heard a lot from Senator Merkley on the radio lately.
Yes, he has been on a lot. There's a few things going
Stacey,
on.
would you like to get started? Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, but I wanted to make sure that you knew. Go for it, Stacy, and then we'll go to Joyce.
Okay. Yep, I can go for it. So a couple of things going on in Congress. The Senate just returned from a 14-day recess, and it's looking like the Senate Republicans are going to put forward their own bill, their version of the HEROES Act. I don't have details of what's in it yet, but I can tell you, the senator is hoping that that their version has at least like half of what the HEROES Act has, as far as relief for the economy, relief for small businesses and our health centers and our schools. So we're hoping that after this bill is introduced, we can use that as a negotiation point and try to get some more relief out to the people. The second thing that is going on is regarding the federal troops in Portland. You've probably heard the senator on the radio talking about that quite a bit. He's been leading the opposition to the actions that we've seen in Portland over the last 10 days or so, and has introduced the Preventing Authoritarian Policing Tactics on America's Street Act, an amendment to the NDAA bill on the Senate floor to prevent federal officers from operating off federal property without local invitation, and would require them to wear identification and drive marked vehicles, as well as make any arrests in violation of those rules unlawful. So that is what we're doing right now. Hopefully we'll have some more news on that coronavirus bill. It sounds like the pressure has mounted enough to where there is movement on both sides to get something out. And so it's just going to be TBD.
Great, thank you very much, Stacy. Do we have any questions for Stacy? Okay, well, thank you very much, and please pass on my thanks to the senator. Joyce, what would you like to tell the community and the people on the call from the House side of things?
From the House side of things, well, the House is working on the defense authorization today, but the activity in Portland has been something that the delegation has been very focused on. I think they've all been doing a lot of interviews. In the Senate, it is an amendment to the authorization bill. I think in the House, it's going to be standalone. Later this week, they're planning to address appropriation bills. I think both the Senate and the House are going to be in for a couple of weeks, and looking at a lot of hearings, a lot of amendments, and Stacy, thanks for covering all that.
All right, thank you, Joyce. The question that Mayor Cate probably has for both of you is are there funds for cities to recoup the costs of providing water without getting paid for it.
So I don't know yet on the Senate side what we're going to see. We want that. We really want that. So we'll try.
Hopefully we'll have more answers as we work through the next week and a half on the authorization and appropriations bills.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's going to be a long week.
Mayor Wojtowski is doing something with her hand, but I'm not sure if she's.
I think she's gesticulating on the.
Okay. So I heard on the radio Senator McConnell talking about how the focus was going to be on jobs and kids, and I think the kids reference was to schooling. What are the thoughts about funding for schools in it? I just don't know the details.
Joyce, do you remember what's in the HEROES Act for education?
Not exactly. I know there is a hearing on the House side in Ed and Labor later this week that they'll be discussing the reopening of schools. Again, have more information about that later in the week.
And I think I think the HEROES bill had something like $90 billion or $100 billion for K through 12 to help them adapt and be prepared. Whether that will pass the Senate or not it's a good thing that Mitch McConnell is signaling that that's important. But we'll see where the money goes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, Joyce, did you have more to add?
Oh, I was just going to add, the Congresswoman has been working on the Child Care is Essential Act and is hopeful that will move soon. It's not scheduled for a floor vote, but we're hoping soon.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from panelists?
Just kind of a share of some frustration, and that is that some people are still waiting for their stimulus check from the first round. My mom is one of those folks who has not received any stimulus money. Has there been any clarification about making sure that the first round is all sent out before they start sending a second round to either businesses, school, to anybody really?
No. So Joyce, you guys might have a different experience, so chime in if this isn't accurate, but we haven't been able to get any real information from the IRS.
It has been a big problem. I know we're working on it, and I'd encourage your mom to contact one of our congressional offices. Their staffing has been less responsive than any of us wanted, but we're still pushing on it, and we'll continue to do that until it gets resolved.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I'm so sorry about that. It feels similar to the emails I get that are increasing in desperation around unemployment and the pandemic unemployment assistance. So where we have systems, Joyce's boss and Stacy's boss worked hard to get things set up, and then they're just not to everybody. And then I just wanted to invite Diane McLaren. Did you have any questions or comments for Joyce or Stacy from the community college perspective?
No, I think we're just
regarding the new bills.
We're also anxious to hear how the next round of the stimulus package goes, and hoping for some funding, of course, for community colleges.
And then Mayor Cape.
Yes, I was interested, is Congresswoman Bonamici going to have another town hall type meeting for elected officials? I did join her town hall meeting that she had, and I'm thankful that she had it, but it's also hard for us to get to some of our issues when you got everybody within I don't know, there's probably close to 1 million people in her district, and they're all calling in with their their comments, and those are important. But it's nice when we can have those direct conversations with her. So just wondering about that.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. She enjoys those too and finds them very valuable. And we are going to schedule more elected officials meetings, hopefully in August, but we don't have firm dates for those. But as soon as they are on the calendar, we will be reaching out to you and letting you know.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. Okay, any last comments? Shannon, you've been surprisingly quiet. I don't actually need to call on you, but we haven't had any. Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you very much for the federal update. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go, hopefully Commissioner Starrett is prepared. I was going to go to Commissioner Starrett next. What would you like to tell people today?
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all for being on the call. As you noticed, and some of you might have noticed, that we started getting our updates from our Health and Human Services Public Health Director. They had it broken down by number of positive cases in a variety of other different categories by age and zip code. But we noticed that there has been a change in that the number of deaths, number of hospitalizations, instead of us having the current number of hospitalizations, we have the aggregate number of hospitalizations since the beginning, which would probably be starting, I'm guessing, around March or before. So I asked why, because as we know, the justification for the shutdown has been overwhelming our hospital systems. And typically we have one hospitalization in Yamhill County between the two systems. So what we're seeing now is this aggregate number, and it doesn't really give us a picture pretty much of where we're at today. So I asked about getting that number pulled out, and it's been a little confusing to me, and I'm trying to kind of sort of get to the bottom of how we can get that number back, because it says that now they're starting to report this number differently. So what they're doing is at the local level, pulling together an aggregate data from a database that the hospitals are all reporting in. And there are a couple of challenges to this, is because we have a number of those ever hospitalized, and they're supposedly watching that to see if we begin seeing increases. I don't know why we can't do that with the current number of hospitalizations. So if we start to see that number increase, if we started to see 4, 5, 6, 10 hospitalizations, that would tell us something. So that's a little bit confounding to me. And now they're trying to problem solve with the way the data is being collected, because a lot of the positive cases they say are transferred to other hospitals out of the county. Now they're saying that some hospital systems like Providence have started to report as a health system instead of as a hospital. So they're trying to see how we can get that data, or how it impacts the data that we have access to. And there isn't a notification for when people are discharged. And so it's becoming a little bit more kind of a head scratcher to look at it and just be able to figure where we are. So what I have been asking is if we could just get this one number that we can look at every day, and that will give us really the bottom line of what we need to know. So they do get the overall number, but they don't know if they say now it's the same person who was reported, for instance, yesterday, or if it's a new person. And so they're working on refining the data. And so I know it sounds unclear, but it is unclear, because it was really pretty simple last week, and now it seems to be a lot more complex. So I'm interested daily in that hospitalization number, and now we just don't seem to get that. We've got that aggregate number. So I'll continue to try to get that number back, but that would be what my update would be.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Are there questions for Commissioner Starrett? And along those lines, I believe we also have a new definition of recovered. So our recovered numbers look a little bit different in our own county data as well. Right, Commissioner Starrett?
Correct. And so it is becoming one of those sort of like trying to play whack-a-mole to try to get, to get the data so that it's pretty easy to tease out what you're looking for on a day-to-day basis. But they're hoping to be able to just put that down in a more refined way. And I don't know why it's getting more complicated, but it is. And yeah, and what is the definition of is, if you will? And they're also I don't really understand. To me, it's all about capacity, hospital capacity, and what does recovered mean, as you mentioned, Commissioner.
Right. I understood some of the rationale for the changing definitions, but I also I like when I can understand the data and I get familiar with it. So I'm definitely with you in going, wait a minute, I know how to read this now. I've also, I was kind of proud of the fact that Yamhill County had a lot of people who were recovered. And so then to change it, changes what our county looks like at least. Are there any other questions for Commissioner Starrett? Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner.
And Commissioner, just real quickly, yes. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to jump off at 1:30 just to let you know.
That sounds great. Thank you. Thanks for letting us know, and I appreciate you attending. And then Thank Commissioner you. Olson has sent some comments, and I'll pull them up in just a minute as a transition and read some of them for you. But I would love to now go to mayors. And Mayor Wojtowski, can we begin with you?
Sure. Something that's been interesting for me is in December, I went to Washington, D.C. for a municipal leader, a female municipal leader conference at the White House, and was able to network with several other women around the country who are in really similar roles, either as council presidents or mayors primarily. And several of them became my Facebook friends after a networking event. And it's been, the last couple weeks in particular has been, I'm monitoring their social media presences and stories a little bit. And some interesting things are popping up, and we haven't seen them here, but they're just sort of anecdotal things I want to share a little bit just to keep an eye out. A city councilor in Texas this morning was sharing that they had several COVID tests stolen from a health clinic and were being used in like a pop-up tent style homemade sign for $200 a piece. And that people were lining up because they were promising quick results. This is something that they're seeing in Texas today. Florida was seeing some really interesting things with some private companies offering tests that had not been tests for efficacy at all, and were not approved, and were from, again, kind of these hastily set up facilities, not permitted clinics. So again, I've not heard of anything like that in Oregon, but I wanted to kind of share that I have seen a couple of other municipal leaders say, please don't go to these. These are not legitimate testing sites, just so that we can kind of keep an eye open for that. I wanted to express a little bit of frustration. Like I did earlier, but I'm going to kind of repeat that. I think that we obviously need to see more economic stimulus, legislative activity at the federal level, more distribution at the state level. We need to see those flows continue, but it's also really hard when I see my mother struggling, having not received the first payment, to know that others are going to receive an additional payment. It was similar to some of the very big businesses that got the PPP loans right away, while small businesses waited and some had to permanently close doors. I really hope there's going to be some effort to kind of audit that process from some sort of IRS mechanism to make sure that the people who are really entitled to those payments have received them or are going to be receiving them before additional things go out. for fairness, for equity, for a million other reasons, but for goodwill, if not for economic necessity. We can talk about schools a little bit. The last week in my world, and I'd be interested. I see Mayor keeps on a call, so I'm not sure he can hear me, but I am interested in knowing your observations and conversations you're participating in about schools reopening, because the tone of that in my world among educators has shifted really significantly in about the last week to week and a half. Lots of my colleagues who have had no sincere intent to not return are talking about the safety of their families, of their parents or grandparents or young children or immunocompromised individuals. We have a significant number of multiple generation homes in the city of Dayton, where we have lots of children who live with grandparents. And there's significant concern for exposing those grandparents if kiddos are at school, even with best practices and cohorts. And and from my teacher perspective, and again, I was even a part of writing our reentry plan, but things have changed since that was a task that we were working on. Additionally, as things have shifted, both in addition and also just in reflection, and getting more context and understanding of how things would work out at practically, in a classroom, in a hallway, in an office, in those buildings. I don't know how much instruction could possibly happen if we are expected to provide the sanitation, the supervision, the interventions, all of the additional roles that schools fill that are so critical, that are outside of instruction. And so I'll just be really honest. My own opinion has shifted on this. Last month, I was ready to reopen with precautions. This month, I'm not sure that I want my children in a school building. I should just say earlier this month and then currently in this month. I do have an immunocompromised child with an immunoglobulin deficiency. And I am concerned for her safety, but I'm also, right now I do the grocery shopping, banking, paperwork, lots of things for my grandmother, and I don't want to have to not see her or be in any contact with her, but certainly if I'm in a classroom, I can't take that to my grandmother. And the conversation among educators has shifted a lot, and not just the long-term teachers in classrooms. There are groups of subs that are not returning. There are teachers looking at early retirement. There are petitions to TSPC to not suspend teacher licenses if teachers have to quit at the last minute, which is typically something that there's disciplinary action for. And of course, it's all based on concerns for safety. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a long time. But a lot of the conversation around schools, I will just be very frank in telling you, is clearly coming from people who haven't been in schools either recently or perhaps since they were children, because I hear lots about all the things that we're going to have kids do. And at my dinner table last night, discussing this with my husband, who's the the chair of our local school board as well. And I expressed concerns to him directly with, our reopening plan. And he said, but didn't you have concerns about distance learning? And I did. But distance learning was thrown on us without planning. And my concern at this point is, I feel like we should be spending this time building a distance learning plan, getting curriculum developed that can be accessed online, looking at the best platforms, looking at through the equity lens to figure out how we can equalize that learning experience and environment for our students, particularly the most vulnerable. And instead, we're making in-person plans that I feel like at best are going to be thrown out in October when people get sick. And so that's a frustration for me. And even though I had a lot of concerns about distance learning, my concern at this point is I can't imagine in-person instruction is going to be more effective given the context we would be looking at doing that instruction in, and it will be less safe. So if it's not going to be more effective and could be less safe, it's really hard. And as an educator, as a parent, as a community member, as the spouse of a board member, and all of my roles, I am so conflicted and torn over solutions for schools. But I do know that there are literally hundreds of questions related to safety for teachers and custodians and food service employees and everything, and that are not answered yet. And I don't think we're ready.
So, Mayor, I'm gonna. There are lots of people here who may want to ask questions or add to your thoughts, but I just want to let you know, and people on the call, that your concerns and the change that you have experienced is reflected in so many people that I talk to. Just absolutely the same thing. A shift in what they view as possible, and a shift in an understanding of safety. Conversations and talk about people retiring or quitting or going on strike or whatever. And so I want you to know that that's the same thing I hear. So you're not alone in that, including the thing about going to strong training over an online program and getting teacher training established and set up right now. So maybe you read my emails, but I should forward some of them to you so that you feel not alone. With that transition, would anybody else like to add to that, or do you have questions? Stacy Jockinson.
I'm just going to share. I also have 2 kids in school, and I feel differently every single day about which option is best. And frankly, all the options feel wrong and right. And it's been very, very conflicting. I know kids want to go back to school, and it's not going to look the same as it did, and it's going to be a hard. I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm feeling it right there with you, and everything doesn't quite feel right. And I just appreciate the work that you do.
And I do know that at least our local colleges are also struggling with this too. But I would invite Diane McLaren to add any thoughts as well from the community college perspective.
Oh, thanks, Casey. Well, I think I've said before, we are going to be mostly remote for fall term, and that all of our athletics for fall have been canceled except for cross country. That will continue. It will look different, I believe. I don't know that we'll be competing with other schools in the same way. We share those same concerns about opening up and how we can make it as safe as possible when we do open.
Okay, thank you very much, Diane. And I think that
can I ask Diane a follow-up question on the sports thing? I'm curious if you've been a part of any conversation related to the athletics and competition. I'm curious if anyone considered like just swapping the seasons so that like baseball and softball would play in the fall, and in track and field, which tend to be less contact and more distance, and then moving the fall sports to the spring. Has that been a discussion at all that you're aware of?
I have heard that as well, but not as part of a discussion I've been involved in. So no, I have no firsthand knowledge of that.
Mayor Kate may be able to add to that.
Yeah, I think that the biggest argument against that is on players' safety and being able to be prepared for their season if you move the season. So can they physically be in playing shape when you change the seasons? So that's the biggest argument against it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have comments from the business perspective, City of McMinnville? Okay, this is obviously a big conversation, and we're just hitting some high points and some concerns. But Mayor Cape and Mayor Wojtowski, is there anything that you would ask people who are on this call and people in the community as well to do or to talk about regarding school reopening and what that looks like?
Well, I'll go. I would mirror a lot of what Mayor Wojtowski said. And this is, I want to make this very clear. This statement is very much my opinion, my feelings, and is not reflective of my employer or bosses or anything that I've heard from them. It's just, I just, the more and more we move forward, I just really feel that, and get the sense that there won't be a normal startup in September. It's just a personal feeling that I get. I just don't see that happening. And I think one of the biggest things that for the residents to kind of, if people have questions, the number one thing to do is to look at your local school district's plan. And I know a lot of districts don't have that available yet, and that's because they're still working on it. And some districts are putting a lot of details into their plans, and some districts are not making it as detailed, and they're doing that on purpose so that they would have more flexibility to move around as they move forward. So, for example, here in Salem Kaiser, that's kind of the approach we have taken. I believe we're making our plan public this week, and so people can go online and read it, or they can go, there's certain places I think where they can pick up a printed copy of it if they don't have online access. And but really for us, if people want to know what's going to keep their kids or themselves, if they're a staff member, safe, it's really the work instructions. And that's the part that I'm working on right now. Like I said, we've already made our plan, and it's really kind of generic, and they did that intentionally. And it's still the instructions that I'm working on where you get the details. And it is extremely frustrating because just yesterday, I felt like we got one of my biggest tasks accomplished, and we could check it off. And then today I was informed that, there's going to be changes to that. The assumptions that we had made in making our plan have changed. And so we're going to have to go back and make some tweaks to that. But there are also changes that make me wonder if the staff is going to feel safe enough to return to work. And to me, that's a big question. And, and that's part of it. And then also Department of Ed, I believe today, is supposed to release an update of their guidance. And I haven't received that yet from my boss. So he was clicking on refresh every 30 seconds, I think, this morning in our meeting. And so since I haven't gotten it yet, I'm assuming it hasn't been released yet, because he would send that to me pretty promptly. So, it is ever evolving, and maybe delay till tomorrow. That might be if we haven't gotten it yet today. So, but if people want information, if people want answers, it's go to your district. And like I said, a lot of those districts don't have those available yet because they're still working on them. So, and I know that's a big frustration. It's like, what do you do? It's like, but they're not gonna, you don't want them to give you something that's not completed yet, that's not gonna do the general public any good either. So we still just need time to get the details figured out. And I can tell you it's frustrating on my end as well, both as a parent and as a mayor and as an employee. It's frustrating. So I understand that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Cape. Mayor Hill, what would you like to add?
I was going to leave my report for education, wrap that up in my report, but since we're talking about it, I've been in contact with Linfield, and Linfield is planning on opening school for their their spring semester. And that is a moving target of how they're going to do that. But they're opening their campus and they're having their students come to campus. And that is a weekly discussion of how to do the classes, how to protect staff, employees, and the students there. But as of last week, they were still moving forward with that. Last week, the McMinnville School District, which includes Lafayette, presented to their board. And, Friday as we talk, we understand that the districts have full control of what they do. And in the McMinnville, Lafayette district and within the cities, they're still planning on opening school in September. They've done a survey to parents, about 1,700 parents, and they came back with about 90% of the parents answered that they would prefer a hybrid model, which would feature elementary students in class every week of the day and secondary students in class 2 days a week, with all other days being distance learning. 10% favored just distance learning. So from a parent perspective, that's the information they're getting back. They didn't share what the employees, teachers, and employees felt from that perspective, but that's a direction that was presented to the McMinnville School District and their board last week, and they're moving forward from that perspective. So that's an update in McMinnville as it relates to education.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And Mayor Wojtowski, I asked the question about what would you like, what help would you like, or what would you like people to know out in the community? Did you have anything you wanted to add before we keep moving around?
One thing is the distinction. I have heard a few people talk about the return to employment, return to work activities for lots of other types of jobs. And there is a distinction between the work environment that most adults work in and what classrooms look like. When you talk about these environments, I had a friend compare it to a grocery store. If grocery store clerks are working, then teachers can go to work. And there's a couple points to that. The first is that distance learning is not the absence of teachers working. Distance learning is a tremendous amount of work for teachers. It's still tons of planning. It's tons of recording. It's significantly increased communication efforts and all of the still grading, accountability, meeting learning targets, hitting state standards, all of those things that we all the time do, and having to do it very differently. And so one thing is that if schools are online, if schools are distant learning, teachers are working, and they're working really hard. They're probably working significantly more hours than they do when they have a classroom and an environment set up, and where they already have something where a lot of the things that would distract or delay student work can be mitigated, where you can increase their focus, where you can feed them first, where you can meet their needs, where you can send them to a counselor, where you can report their child abuse, where all these other things that happen in a classroom, it's really hard to do all those things distance learning. So the first is that we're not saying teachers shouldn't go back to work. No teachers unions are saying let's just not have education. So I want to offer that point of clarification. The other difference is that while there are a lot of frontline employees and workers who really are in pretty direct way of, yes, okay, sorry, we need a juice box right this second, are at risk of infection, teachers would be in a little bit of a unique situation in that, we've seen studies where children, I think it was in Florida, tested like 31% tested positive and were asymptomatic. So there's some issues with, we can't tell who the sick kids are. So it would be difficult to know where the highest points of risk are. But also there are not 30 children who all want to touch each other and their teacher in a grocery store that are the same age and similar level of development and high energy, and are being asked to tackle difficult tasks and grow their minds. And there are no other professions that compare to that type of work going on in a classroom. Even in the medical profession where there's clearly going to be significant risk and of exposure, they're going to have, I hope at this point, more adequate PPE than we've had in schools. They're going to have training that we don't have in schools. And again, they're not going to see dozens of kids in a day or hundreds of kids in a day, depending on the size of that district. Those are things that are unique. And the level of contact, and I don't mean physical touching, but the level of, verbal connectivity, lesson connectivity, instructional connectivity is significantly higher than most employees have. Even if they have thousands of customers through a store, they don't have a direct experience with each of them. We need to have direct experiences with our students and be able to answer their questions and have those interactions. So schools and closing schools and opening schools is hugely different than opening other sectors of our economy.
Thank you, Mayor. And to follow the example of the grocery store, if we did have 30 kids in a grocery store, we would probably close the grocery store. I mean, I'm not really, but you know what I mean. That if the situation was the same, we would look at it differently.
If there was one grocer too, you're talking
exactly.
One employee.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate you adding to that. Mayor Hill, do you want to do an update now for your community about things beyond the city? I'm sorry, beyond schools.
Thank you, Commissioner, and those on the line. Again, I surely appreciate your reports and your concerns that are being shared. The thing I wanted to start out with is just recognize our county for what I think is a fairly good job of keeping our masks, washing our hands, keeping our physical distancing. As we look at the Oregon Health Agency's reporting, we're sitting at about 2.9 that have a positive test compared to the state wanting to be at 0.5 or at 5.0. So we're well ahead of that curve. In McMinnville, our last reporting showed that we had 73 cases, 1 death, and that is 20.2 per 10,000 individuals. And that's been very consistent as we're moving down. So I just wanted to give a shout out a little bit that I think we are listening to the governor's recommendations as it relates to protecting ourselves. And so, we can look at the negative, but we also ought to applaud, I think, what is a lift in Yamhill County. Friday I shared that, McMinnville downtown on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the meals that are being provided there. We have 20 participating in that program. We're having, following all of the governor's orders as it relates to the distancing, the sanitation, the mask. And I think we're having a great lift and people are coming out a little bit, but it is very controlled. And so I just wanted to share from that perspective. From a county perspective, YCAP is using the motel and housing program, and we're having great success with that. Matter of fact, we're looking at a COG grant that may be able to give us monies to help support that program also. And so some good things from that perspective. Wednesday night, the city, we're going to have a work session where we're looking at our diversity, equity, inclusion, and having our first really expanded discussion around that. We're going to bring our resolution of inclusion back to the table, and we're probably going to start the process of having a deeper dialogue. And what does that mean? We're going to be putting a committee together that's filled with citizens, government, and nonprofit together on that. So again, I'm very excited from that perspective. And then lastly, tonight we have McMinnville Water and Light Commission meeting, and some of the things that we're going to be talking a little bit from that perspective is, again, you can count on the water that's coming and our electric. We have gone to a 4 a 4-day-a-week, 10-hour shift, giving us much more flexibility for our workers to stay safe. And it gives us much more flexibility that we're not open just 8 to 5, but it gives us expanded days, so the days that we're open. We are giving assistance out through our Helping Hands program, where Mac Water and Light and the city of McMinnville are helping defray some of the costs for those that are hit the hardest. But at the same time, we're seeing a growing number of individuals that aren't paying bills, and they're not even getting a hold of us. And so that will be a discussion tonight, that we at least expect people to reach out and talk to us. And just not paying a bill is not a solution. And so many other things that are going on, but those are, I think, the things that I'd like to share this week as we're moving together. And again, the ever concern around the businesses that are struggling and what we can do to support them. We're still looking for assistance in giving in the business rebuilding process that we're going through. So just a couple of things there.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Do we have any questions from Mayor Hill? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Shannon, Buckmaster, what would you like to tell people in the community if you're ready?
Well, first of all, Abishal Stone sends her regrets that she's not able to join us this afternoon, and she will be with us on Friday. One of the conversations, actually speaking to Mayor Hill's concern, is that my phone is ringing. Is that our communities are starting to have conversations about what long-term resiliency looks like for our business, and much to the credit of SEDCOR and Abishal's work on behalf of our county, as we were collecting data in March, April, May, and then through the grant programs, including the Yamhill County Grant Program and then the the Berg program as well. We actually have significant data on what our businesses think they need, the amount of money they need, the kind of support they need. So we're actually going into the second half of summer and the fall, and Joya at the MAC Chamber, I know her update is coming, but we're all starting to proactively have this conversation. So some of the services or support that we're thinking that we should focus on would be things like childcare, technology, and continued remote working spaces, PPE access, just really going into this conversation, but we also don't want to risk developing a plan on behalf of our business community without consulting our community, right? We don't want to create a gift that may not be the gift that they want. So we're also looking at a communication initiative coming out from our chambers to verify what we think would be a good plan against what an actual good plan would be. And those conversations may have to be guided by sector, but we're in this for the long haul now. So it's time to move out of the reactive phase and think, what is business going to look like for the next 12 to 18 months? And how do we support our businesses getting there? So these conversations are really helpful, especially conversations about the school. We actually know that one of the biggest obstacles to returning to work is childcare, access to childcare, and schools provide that service. And when they don't provide that service, we don't have access in private childcare opportunities, nor do we have as much income available for expenses like those. And we certainly don't want to risk an entire generation of vulnerable people who have gone into the workplace, especially women. We know that childcare typically falls to the women still in most of American homes, and so we don't want to compromise that progress as well, thinking about what it looks like to go back to work. Other than that, I would just encourage, as our elected officials may be watching and catching up with this, especially at the state level, encourage those conversations about unemployment systems, getting those in place, especially because we're talking about a change maybe at the federal level of either renewing or bringing in a different unemployment stimulus package, right? Instead of the 600, maybe it would be up to 200 or up to 400 or 80 to 90% of wages is what we're hearing. None of that's exactly concerned, but any of those would also create an additional burden on our unemployment system, just as they have to go in and fix their internal structures to handle those different financial processes as well. So we want to be really thoughtful about what that looks like for our business. And finally, I would just continue to advocate for funding opportunities for your economic development partners. We have been identified and working as critical partners to our public agencies. And now we are at critical funding issues, right? We've been doing this work without any access to relief funding, including PPP. We can't even apply for other forms of SBA, like the EIDL, as that program shifted to agricultural components. If you hadn't gotten in the first round of funding, you don't have that funding opportunity. So here we are now, over 4 months in, doing more work than we have ever done, and we have not received any financial relief. I've heard of several of my executive chamber colleagues around the western part of the United States losing their positions at their chambers of commerce just this last week because there's simply no money available. This is the last thing to cut, is staffing. Any questions?
Whew. Thank you, Shannon. And at the county level, I'm hoping that we can develop a grant program or like a request for proposals specifically for childcare and for internet expansion into areas where school districts know that there's a gap. And I realize that the childcare component is going to be really challenging, kind of either way, whether they're in school or physically or not in school physically, or in school but not physically. So thank you very much for that. More conversations, but I really appreciate hearing from you. And Joya Goodrum, what would you like to tell people in these remaining minutes here?
Hey, everybody, it's Joya. Good to, oh, there you are. Hello. I really don't have much of an update today. We're still working on Lemonade Day, and I know you're just all tired of hearing about it, but y'all know about it. And Mayor Hill, I know we're going to see you out there on that day on August 15th, and I look forward to seeing folks. We did ask the library, and I just want to shout out to the library, the McMinnville Library. They actually took some bags and were delivering them to kids through the bookmobile, the Lemonade Day bags. So that was really fun and exciting. And hopefully we have a few more. And if they're willing to do that, we're happy to give them to the library for delivery to the kids. And that's about all I've got for today. Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Nice to see you too, Joya. Thank you. Are there any questions from everybody? Okay, I want to make sure. Thank you very much. I want to make sure that we get to Brian Young, our Office of Emergency, or our emergency manager. You can see he's so patiently waited. Brian, what would you like to tell people in the community today? And are you there? Oh yeah, you're there.
I will tell you that redwoods are huge. Had a great trip. So I like what Shannon said about the strategic planning piece of this, looking 12 to 18 months out. What we're doing in emergency management is people that we're contacting now, we're trying to get them to think strategically in regards to PPE, because quite honestly, that's what we're dealing with in emergency management, is the PPE aspect of this. So I think, you know, for example, Transit came to me today or late last week about wanting masks for their ridership, and they wanted just 1,000 maybe masks for the next month or so. And we talked about the strategic outlook and doubled that, so we were able to locate fairly simply on the internet. We were able to locate masks, 3,000 masks for them, and get them ordered up today. So the PPE is available. So Shannon, I appreciate what you're saying and having those conversations with those business owners to think ahead and look for that, because I certainly don't want to rely on the state or the county to provide that stuff. We would love to help when we can, but we don't have stockpiles to do that. So and all the teamwork that has been out there, just so appreciated. I think it's just awesome, and it's a testament to who we have in the community and the leadership in the community. So I think that's all I have. Any questions for me, emergency management related?
Questions for Brian Young? Okay, thank you very much, Brian. And I'd just like to note that Mayor Witoski put a comments in the chat feature, but did you want to do a quick plug so the people who are listening, watching, know what you're talking about?
I can, if everybody's had an opportunity to speak. This Saturday, we have our Bands on the Run event and our Don't Stand So Close to Me community dinner. We have 9 bands who will be playing in 9 different zones around the city. In each zone, though, each of the 9 bands will rotate through, so everybody will hear from bluegrass, Elvis impersonator, country rock. Oh gosh, I can't remember. We have a Latinx. We have anyway, all 9 bands will be heard in each of the 9 zones. Additionally, our eateries are each offering a $10 takeout meal that will be delivered by the fire department. So I'm still waiting on the menu choice from one restaurant, but we have a chili verde meal from Juanita's and a 2 dinner frank meal from the Bypass Bar and a chicken barbecue dinner from Lone Star. And our volunteer firefighters will be delivering those meals to people's homes so that they can earn some tip money as a fundraiser in lieu of their typical barbecue, and have an opportunity to recover a little bit of that fundraising for them. And any residents are invited to picnic or barbecue or eat outside in their yards so that people are outside enjoying these concerts from the safety of their own properties. If folks don't live in town or they live off route, and there's only, there's actually, I was trying to be very, very thoughtful in developing the routes. The vast majority of Dayton homes are en route. But if somebody is not en route or does not live in town, they also will go through in front of the grade school on 8th and 9th Street near the high school and by the Legion Field and both of our parks. And so those would all be places that people could socially distance and set up a couple of chairs to enjoy those concerts and have your meals delivered to those locations through the fire department.
Great, thank you very much. Yay, there's so much creativity, right? And I just want to make sure, Diane McLaren, did you get everything you would like to say? What else would you like to tell people in the community?
Well, I just wanted to give some good news. I really want to give a shout out to Senator Merkley's office at Chemeketa. He helped us get a grant, an ag grant, and we're building a new building for our agricultural program, and it will include woody ornamentals. And right now, so it's under construction. We're using some mass timber, which is really good for Oregon. Because it's, it's produced at Ferris Lumber, and at Roseburg Forest Products. So that's good for our economy around the state. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to Senator Merkley's office for helping us get that grant.
Thanks for that shout out, Diane. And I would just say for anyone who's applying for federal grants, the congressional delegations, we love to get grant support letters out to try to get money into Oregon. So think of us.
Great, thank you very much, Stacy, and thank you, Diane. All right, I've got to go to mine, but thank you, everybody. Remember, members of the community, everybody here is working for you and on your behalf. Case counts are going up, hospitalizations are going up around the state. Please wear your masks when you're out in public, wash your hands, and keep your distance from other people. And that's everything that we can do as individuals, but the people on the call here can help you with specific things like business grants, unemployment. Reach out to us. And thank you and be safe out there. And we will see you on Friday.